The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a knock at the door. It was the sound of my phone exploding with messages, one after another, in the middle of the night, and not a single one of them asked if I was okay. My name is Alyssa Grant. I'm 32 years old. I built a tech startup from nothing. Not from family money, not from connections, not from luck, from late nights, burned bridges, skipped birthdays, and a relentless belief that I could build something that mattered. And I did. I sold that company for $20 million. $20 million. The kind of number that was supposed to buy peace, supposed to finally earn the approval I had been chasing my whole life. Instead, it bought me the most painful education of my existence, because the moment I told my family I had lost it all, I discovered who they truly were. Here at Revenge Chronicles, we don't just tell stories. We expose the truth hiding behind smiling faces. And this one shook me to my core. Let me take you back to the night it all started. My lawyer, Simon, had been advising me for years. Sharp, methodical, and always 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. When the sale of my company finalized, before the ink was even dry, Simon pulled me aside and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. He said, "Alyssa, before you tell your family about this money, I need you to do something for me. I need you to tell them you lost everything instead." I stared at him. Lost everything? He nodded slowly. He said the people closest to us reveal their real intentions only when they believe there's something to gain or nothing left to take. He told me to send one message, tell my parents the lie, and then simply watch who contacted me first and what they said. I didn't want to do it. These were my parents, my family, the people who raised me. But something in Simon's voice told me this wasn't just legal caution, it was a warning. So I did it. I sent the message. I told my parents I had made a catastrophic mistake, that I had lost the company, lost the money, lost nearly everything. And then I waited. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. My mother didn't call. My father didn't text. My sister Brooke, who had been blowing up my phone for weeks asking me about the sale, suddenly went completely quiet. And then at 3 a.m, my cousin Emma, the one person in my family who had always been quietly, carefully kind, forwarded me a screenshot. It was from a private family group chat, one I had never been invited to, and at the very top, in my mother's name, were 4 words that made my stomach turn to ice. She had written, "This is our chance." I read it 3 times. Our chance. Our chance for what? I kept scrolling. My Uncle Ray had responded almost immediately. He said if I was broke, I was useless to them. He said to pull the paperwork before I realized what was happening. My father, my own father, responded with 2 words, "We move fast." And then my sister Brooke, sweet smiling Brooke who had hugged me at every family dinner and called me her inspiration, wrote, "Told you she'd crash." She never deserved any of it. I sat in my apartment in the dark, staring at that screen, and something cracked open inside me. Not with grief, not yet, with confusion. What paperwork? What was there to pull? I called Simon immediately, hands shaking, voice barely steady. He didn't seem surprised at all. In fact, he told me to take a breath, because this was exactly what he had been afraid of. He told me there was a family trust, a significant one, set up by my grandmother years ago. I had been named as a primary beneficiary, and my parents had been managing it as trustees. He said the moment they believed I was broke and vulnerable, they would move to remove me. He had seen it before. He had prepared for it. And now we had proof. The next morning, at exactly 7:14, my mother called. Her voice was warm, practiced, and completely hollow. She said, "Alyssa, sweetheart, we need you to come by the house today. There are some things we need to handle together." She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask if I had eaten, if I had slept, if I needed anything. She just needed me to come by the house, to handle things. I told her I would be there. I didn't tell her I wouldn't be coming alone. Driving to my childhood home that morning felt surreal. The streets looked the same, the trees looked the same, but I was not the same person who had grown up running through that yard and begging for approval at that dinner table. Simon had told me the night before, "Do not react, do not show your hand, do not let them see that you know anything. Just observe. Let them perform. And they did perform. When I stepped through the front door, the atmosphere inside was stiff and rehearsed, like everyone had run through their lines before I arrived. My mother didn't hug me, didn't offer a seat, didn't offer coffee, didn't offer the basic warmth of a parent seeing their child in pain. She simply closed the door behind me and whispered that we didn't have much time. My father appeared from the hallway carrying a thick envelope with my name printed on the front in clean, businesslike type. He didn't smile. He didn't meet my eyes. He just held it out and said, "Sign these. It's better for everyone if you do." Brooke was sitting on the couch across the room with her arms crossed, wearing the small, satisfied smirk of someone who had been waiting a very long time to watch me fall. I took the envelope from my father's hands. It was heavier than it should have been, the way bad news always is. I opened it slowly, deliberately, running my eyes down the first page, and then I saw it. 3 words that knocked the air clean out of my lungs. Revocation of beneficiary rights. My own family, the people who had watched me grow up, who had sat across from me at every Thanksgiving table, who had smiled in every family photograph, they were legally cutting me out of everything my grandmother had built and left behind. My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice the way you do when you're trying to sound gentle while doing something monstrous. She said if I signed now, they wouldn't pursue the clause that penalized irresponsible heirs. Irresponsible heirs. That's what they called me. The woman who had just built and sold a $20 million company from scratch. Brooke couldn't help herself. She tilted her phone toward me and said loudly, "Look at her, the millionaire who lost it all." She told my father to send it to the family group. Everyone in the room laughed. And in that moment, standing in the home where I had grown up, surrounded by the people I had loved my entire life, I have never felt more alone. But then the front door clicked open behind me. The laughter stopped. Simon walked in. He was wearing a crisp dark suit, carrying his leather briefcase, and his expression was carved from something colder than stone. My mother's smile disappeared so fast it was like watching a mask fall off a wall. My father stiffened. Brooke lowered her phone and took one small step backward without even realizing she had done it. Simon set his briefcase on the coffee table and said, "Good morning. I see you've already started without me." My mother's voice came out in a trembling whisper. She asked why he was here. He looked at her calmly and said, "Because Alyssa didn't lose $20 million. She followed my legal instruction to reveal the truth about this family's true intentions." The silence that filled that room was the kind that has weight. Simon reached into his briefcase and slid a folder across the table. It was much thicker than the envelope they had handed me. Inside were bank transfers, notarized letters, email chains, all of it bearing my parents' signatures. Simon told me clearly, with my family standing right there unable to deny it, that my parents had been systematically attempting to reroute the family trust into a private account under Brooke's name. If I had signed those papers that morning, everything my grandmother had spent her life building, everything she had intended for me, would have been permanently transferred out of my reach, and I never would have seen a single dollar of it. My mother said it was taken out of context. Simon tilted his head slightly and reminded her that the clause she had used to threaten me, the one penalizing irresponsible heirs, was a clause he himself had written. And it was written to apply to fraudulent trustees, not to beneficiaries like me. Brooke went pale. My father's jaw worked silently. The room had shifted completely, and they all knew it. I had spent years in that house feeling like I was the one who never measured up, the one who was always one mistake away from losing their love. But standing there in that moment, I realized their love had always had a price tag. It had always been conditional, calculated, transactional, and the transaction had simply never been in my favor. I set the unsigned envelope on the coffee table and looked at them. I said no, softly, clearly, without anger in my voice. I said, "You'll be signing something today." Brooke scoffed and said I couldn't force them. Simon raised one hand and told her that actually I could. He pulled a new set of documents from his briefcase, clean and precise and devastating in the way that only legal paperwork can be. He placed them in front of my parents and explained that what they were looking at was the formal resignation of their trustee rights, effective immediately. He told them that failure to sign would trigger a full court audit of every account they had touched in the last 15 years. My father's voice came out rough and desperate. He said I wouldn't dare. Simon looked at him without blinking and said, "Try me." I watched them fall apart in front of me. The anger came first, hot and defensive, the kind of anger that knows it has already lost. Then the fear. Then the slow, sickening realization that the trap they had set for me had closed around them instead. My mother's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. She looked at me and said, "Alyssa, please, we were only trying," and I finished the sentence for her. "To steal from me," I said. "To humiliate me. To record me breaking." Brooke lurched forward and told me I couldn't take everything from them. I turned to her slowly and said, "I'm not taking everything. Just everything that was never yours." They signed. Both of them, defeated, cornered, reduced by their own greed to something I barely recognized. But just as I exhaled, Simon leaned close and told me there was one last thing I hadn't seen yet. Something my grandmother had left only for me. He reached into his briefcase one final time and pulled out a small velvet envelope, aged and ivory-colored, sealed with dark wax. My heartbeat stuttered. Simon told me it had been entrusted to him by my grandmother, with instructions to give it to me only after my parents had revealed their true intentions. My mother lunged forward and said I didn't need to see it. I held up one hand, and for the first time in my life, she obeyed. I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter in my grandmother's looping, familiar script, and a single key. She wrote that she had always known my strength would come from surviving what others tried to break in me. Beneath the letter was a second document, property deeds to a private estate in Vermont, worth more than the trust itself. My grandmother had known. She had seen this betrayal coming years before I ever could, and she had made sure I would be protected when it finally arrived. My father's voice cracked when he realized what it was. He whispered that his own mother had left that to me. I felt nothing toward him when he said it. Not anger, not sadness, not satisfaction. Just distance, the clean, quiet distance of someone who has finally stopped waiting to be loved by people who are never capable of it. I folded my grandmother's letter, slipped the key into my pocket, and walked toward the door. I told them this family had ended itself. I was just walking away from the ruins. The morning sun was warm across the driveway when Simon caught up to me and said, "You didn't lose $20 million, Alyssa. You gained your freedom." And standing there in the light, breathing air that finally felt clean, I understood what he meant. Because some things that look like losses are actually the most important wins of your life. And some people, no matter how long you love them, will never love you back the way you deserve. If this story hit you somewhere deep, you already know why. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And stay with Revenge Chronicles, because the truth always finds a way to the surface.